Hi, everyone. So, welcome, welcome. We have really interesting array of guests for you the next few months until the end of January, because this is our truly incredibly insightful, transformative journeys that we're going to be sharing with you. We have people who have decided not to go the way of mainstream anything, not mainstream media by anymore by any stretch of the imagination, but also not mainstream health or lack of it, not mainstream wealth or superabundance of it, and definitely not a mainstream lifestyle, which involves being totally at ease with not being well, with accepting illness as normal, with being in the doldrums and thinking it's okay. We were given life. A truly magical energy was given to us, and a body that will rise to the occasion whenever we need it and heal whatever is ailing us. This body never lies. It always tells us the truth, whether we're listening or not. So I invite you all to join us also in the comments section, because we will have a live chat so if you so desire. We will definitely have you in the live chat later. And we want to make sure that your voice is heard. Today, I want to welcome a special guest, Bella Payne, who uses her voice in many different ways, which we'll discover momentarily. So, welcome, Bella, and please unmute yourself.
Hi, Dorit. Thank you so much for having me. And I loved that opening. I loved everything you just said. That made me very happy. I agree with everything that, especially your use of the word mainstream and people who choose not to have a mainstream lifestyle.
And can you tell us, Bella, you've been traveling a lot, not in the way of going for visit here or there, but you have been moving long distance quite a bit. Can you tell us about also what do you learn when you move and you have to uproot everything in your life and start all over again? What in what ways could this be transformative for us? Because I actually dread moving. It is I have been through wars, I've been through terror attacks and survived. I don't think I've ever survived a move.
I totally get what you mean. It's supposedly one of the top five most traumatic experiences that anybody will experience. And I've moved a lot in my life. When I was a child growing up, by the time I was in high school, I had attended 6 different schools. We moved up and down the East Coast, eventually settling in Florida. And then I moved across the country to California when I was right out of college. I've lived in California for over 20 years, so this is my home now. But I lived in Northern California for a few years and then recently moved back down to Los Angeles. And you asked me what kinds of transformations take place. I would equate it to, this is going to sound really funny, but I would equate it to one of those psychedelic journeys that people talk about. Like I've never done psychedelics or ayahuasca, but when people talk about them, they always talk about having to face these like horrors in their mind, and they volunteer to go on the journey. And if you're paying attention, if you're present, you can learn a lot about your deepest fears. And you can actually, what I have found with every single move through paying attention to these horrors that come up is that I can actually become transformed by them. I can learn about the roots of these deepest fears, and then I can change the thought patterns that tend to come after. Because the problem with fear, and this is why I think moving is so traumatic, is because the fear can actually completely consume your entire being, which can, if you're not paying attention, can lead to really destructive decisions because you're just trying to relieve yourself of the fear. But if you're paying attention and you understand that this is just part of the process, then you can learn a little bit about where your deepest fears come from. And it's a great opportunity to transform the fears and leave behind the charge that they have on you so that you can move forward in life and move forward, start a better life. And that's exactly what I go through every single time. And I'm going through that right now. It's been scary and kind of exciting all at the same time.
Thank you for that, Bella. So, what you just said was really interesting about the fear aspect of it, because I have lived in several different countries, quite a few. Never feared moving to them, never feared moving to another one. It's but if I have to move to another apartment in the same building, that's where the trauma comes in. I don't know why this is. Now, Lisa, you are about to run away for a while and move to Central America for a month. You have traveled a lot. You love to travel. Does what Bella say bring up anything for you?
It absolutely does, Bella. What you shared is deeply received by me because I think what I take away from what you're sharing is this when you go somewhere, I think it's like a snow globe. It shakes everything up, It's like, whoa, I didn't know all this was going on, right? In our day-to-day world, sometimes we can just be in that programming mindset where we're just, we're in our whatever reality we're in, right? Just kind of going through life. And then when you get outside of that and you move, it's like, oh, okay, who am I, right? Because part of the definition of who we are tends to be what we circle ourselves with in our 3D world, so to speak. And so I am really always guided by the butterfly. The butterfly has been a deeply personal spirit animal to me because there's the caterpillar, right? And then it goes into that state, I don't know if it's chrysalis or chrysalis, where it's reinvents itself, and it's dark, right? That darkness going within, and then it gets those wings and flies. And I just think that's true of the journey that we're on in life. And that's when I travel, I love the fact that I am forced to confront who I am because it's all a mirror, right? And you're being exposed to a culture that you may not have references to. It's not familiar, and I think it's like that snow globe. I find it really exciting because I always feel like I take myself with me and I go into a space and I come back transformed at some level. So I absolutely connect with what you shared. Thank you.
So, Pete, I wanted to find out from you right now. You're traveling. So now that you're traveling, you go to Morocco a lot, it seems. So how do you actually find moving? And we just lost Pete. So he is traveling right now. So this might happen a lot today during this live stream that he'll be on and off. So just be aware of that. So I'm going to bring back in Bella. Bella, can you tell us your story as a child with your mother?
Okay, so I do talk about my mom a lot in my writing and my blog. Um, we had it's mostly for entertainment purposes. I'm not scarred by it at all, but she is a prominent figure in my story of transformation, of how I became plant-based, how I ended up changing my whole, well, developing a whole philosophy, because I didn't even have one before the age of well, when I was 10, I discovered what a vegetarian was. And I wanted to become a vegetarian. I came home and I announced to my family I was going to be a vegetarian. And my mom said, no, you're not, because she was the one who cooked all the food and she wasn't about to cook for two, I totally understand and I don't blame her for it. But it did become a battle in our house. And when I turned 15, I decided that the next year when I turned 16, I would be able to get a job, and I would buy my own food. And I really did this because I wanted to become a vegetarian, but there was something quite enticing about the rebellion that every teenager wants to rebel against their parents. And this was a real sore point with my mom. And I think a lot of it had to do with, well, I think I've heard this story with a lot of parents, so it's not necessarily always cultural, but my mom is Italian American. And so food is a big part of our culture. And to become a vegetarian in an Italian family can be quite controversial. And we had a lot of battles in our house over it. And I think it provided in some ways a safe form of rebellion. I think I very much enjoyed the arguments because there was nothing she could do about my belief system. There was nothing she could do about what I chose to put in my mouth. That's why you hear a lot of stories about eating disorders and how it's an attempt to control their situation. And yeah, my mom was very much against it. But then by the time I was 19, I went vegan. And I think she just kind of gave up fighting me. She realized that it was not a phase. It was something that I cared very much about from a moral perspective. And also within those years of becoming vegetarian, I noticed an enormous change. So the topic is transformation. I developed an amazing transformation in my spirit and in my emotional well-being. I had been a very sad and angry teenager. And when I went plant-based and then I started exercising, I noticed that my optimism grew and I felt better about myself. And eventually my mom did accept it and she started making vegan versions of foods, and she's actually quite good at it.
So I've always been interested in Italian American mothers or fathers who say exactly that, and get upset when a child or when the family goes vegetarian and say, well, I'm not going to cook for two or separate meals, when in truth, in Italy itself, most meals are vegetarian. In Italy itself.
It's true. And especially when you go back to the Italy has such a, how do I say it? A troubled history. There's a lot of poverty, and especially in the southern region, which is where my family's from. And a lot of people there historically were too poor to have meat. And even the pasta was originally made without eggs. So you go to an Italian restaurant now and it's really a sign, it's a symbol of status to be able to go to an Italian restaurant that serves fresh pasta in America. And all of the fresh pasta is made with eggs. And it's quite frustrating because the original way of making pasta is without eggs. Because if you think about it, just from an economical standpoint, why would you waste an egg in the pasta if you don't have to? When you don't have a lot of money, you use whatever is available, and usually what's available is plants. And Italians were always quite gifted at foraging. So you have all kinds of things like wild arugula, dandelion greens. You're right. There's a whole history. I actually have a really great cookbook. It's meant to be a very artistic preservation of traditional culture. It's called Vegetariano, and it's a whole encyclopedia of traditional Italian dishes, and they're 100% vegetarian, not vegan, but vegetarian. So yeah, you're correct. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem only comes up when it's vegan, when there's no dairy, no eggs. Yes. And we're going to come back to this as well. I just want to thank you, first of all, and to introduce Pete. Pete, yeah, could you come in, please, and let us know? You're right now in Morocco. Let us know, for you, listening to Bella, what stands out for you most?
Okay, can you hear me? Have I lost you again? Am I there?
Yes, you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Great. We're just having some problems. Can you repeat that again? Yes, we are back and forth to Morocco because of projects we have here and supporting people here as well as coming over and working on some projects. What I have noticed here as well as a few other places, it's really interesting. Oh, by the way, your introduction was amazing, and it's really everyone's what they've said so far is great. And we are obviously on a journey. It's lovely sharing our stories so people can hear our stories and how we navigate, how we are able to sustain what we're doing. And we would like to feel thriving. And if we maybe dip a little bit, we know how to get back to thriving, which is beautiful, having them tools and protocols. So in Morocco is if you don't have meat on the table, it's a sign of poverty. So in a lot of cultures, I'm going to say that's a bit of the psyop, but to keep a lot of us dumbed down really and more, I'm going to say ill. However, it's beautiful fruits in Morocco. When I was in St. Lucia, beautiful fruits, but the cultures have seemed to be in a very different type of mindset. It's as if each country has a different kind of program going on to a level, similar but different. So, yes, I do believe in terms of, if you're talking about eggs and pasta, it's like we've been taken away our natural, more raw ingredients that was really serving it's serving the people, and kind of slid some more detrimental ingredients, and that what compromises the body. So I wasn't sure what else you asked. I missed that last bit, what you asked, Dory.
Yes, so Bella was sharing her story, and I wanted your response to what you heard. I'm not sure what you heard because you were on and off because of the internet. What your response was to her own story, growing up in a home where this was not expected, that one would become vegetarian. And how do you also feel? How does that relate to your own story and your transformation? How do you feel about, because you're a parent several times over and you have a little one right now, having to maybe make food that's different for each member of the family? And I'm not even talking just two people, but each member of the family. Would you accept that? And would you be okay with that?
I have done it in the past, yes. So we have done it. Yeah, I compromise. I mean, my daughter is 22 now. I transitioned when she was about 5, so she was used to what I was used to. So the transition was for me instant and didn't go back. However, I made foods that really was very similar. That's what inspired me more. Very similar to our emotional attachments, to our tastes buds, the way they are. So she was a great teacher for me, actually. Got me into the ice lollies, which were more, you slipping in the green, slipping in the spirulina or chlorella, and then I'll be slipping bits in the foods. She probably doesn't know all of this, so she'll probably be ringing me up in a minute. But so she'll be having the healthy bits in there, and she ate very healthy as well. In terms of very 90% vegan at the time, vegetarian vegan. Her mum was very health conscious too, so she ate very well. But I couldn't. I didn't want to change her. It was just allowing her to choose. So she knew what her dad did, and in relation to going to main.
Okay, so
in an environment that supports the ethos that you were, well, I won't say imposing, but you would like to share with your child. I think meat and dairy is just imposed on children without even they having a choice. So at least she would have been more conscious to have a choice. Some people say we impose that on them, but really, when you really look at the statistics and the, let's just say, the detrimental effect on the body, we impose really very compromising foods on our children blindly. So by being more conscious and implementing more God-given fruits that are more complementary to the body is really a job well done as far as I'm concerned. So I realized she was going to main school after the age of 5. She was.
So we're having some technical difficulties again with Pete. So we're just going to move on and then come back to Pete afterwards. So I'm going to bring in actually Lisa. Lisa, were you exposed to foraging as a child? Because when I have private clients who are really upset about their health, and I mean really upset, and I tell them, and they said, well, does this, one person said to me, does this mean I have to eat organic if I work with you? And I said, actually, no, because I don't think, for me, organic is not the standard. For me, it's biodynamic and wild foraging. Now, Bella was just reminding us that in societies like ancient societies, like the Italian society, foraging was actually what people who didn't have a lot of money did. So they were actually the healthiest people in society. Were you taught anything about foraging, and were you able to forage, Lisa?
It's interesting. Not really. I mean, as I've mentioned in the past, I grew up on an island in Washington State, so we had wild blackberries and strawberries and huckleberries and all that stuff. So we would gather that stuff, and I would do it with my grandma. She'd make pies. She'd can it. I mean, just that, that's the part that we did. Um, when you grow up in a world where the reference points are, how do I say, that it's just a programming like that's, you get it at the store, right? You get it's like it's how people define themselves in terms of their class, and it's interesting how that goes, like what dictates what's on a family dinner table. So I didn't get a lot of foraging except for that experience. And of course, those are beautiful memories for me because they connect me to my mother. They connect me to my grandmother, and I'm sure my great grandmother, that lineage, that going and gathering and picking and the rhythm of that, and then eating it there, eating it while you're going. And it's just a beautiful way to really connect, not only with the food and nature, but the people that you love. So, as opposed to buying something at a store and putting it on the table, while that, I know it's the experience of sharing time with your loved one, but there's something more visceral about getting it yourself, and because you're a part of that whole process and that journey from nature to your plate, to your mouth, to your
Yes,
digestion. Mm-hmm.
yes, yes. Thank you. And you're connecting with not just the land and each other, but with all the 5 elements. And I
Yes.
think connecting with the 5 elements is what's so critically important. We've already done live streams here where we actually focused on each element, each show. And if you want to hear about what the elements are, please look at our shows on the elements, because that's really important. Real food comes from the element. Why? Because we do. And all of Earth, the universe, is made up of the 5 elements. So we need to restore the 5 elements. We don't need to restore calories. We're not meant to eat by this strange, I don't know who came up with it, idea that we're meant to eat calories. You can't touch calorie, you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't listen to it, you can't hear it. And yet we're told that we're meant to eat by calories. So Bella, this foraging, I know that you were talking about, Italians who are not that, shall we say, financially endowed, going wild foraging. But here in the United States, in an Italian American family, did you do any wild foraging, and how did it affect you? So,
No, not at all. No, in fact, it's weird. When I was a kid, it was weird. We were almost afraid of wild foods. Like my mom had a fear of me. Like she was never the kind of person who would no, there was no foraging. But my grandfather was different. My grandfather was, I would call him a holistic healer by today's standards. He was officially a chiropractor, and he was quite ahead of his time. At least that's what we always say in the family. We always would use those words. He was ahead of his time because he was very much like us in his philosophy about nutrition. And by the way, I'm really intrigued by what you just said about the elements versus the calories. And I wish my grandfather was alive today so I could ask him about that. But he would have been the one. Unfortunately, he was out of my life by the time I was 9 years old, and I didn't get a chance to become curious enough. But he had fruit trees in his backyard. I remember there were every kind of citrus tree you can imagine: kumquats and lemons, grapefruits, oranges, and he instilled a love of taking fruit from the backyard. And I have to imagine his knowledge of wild plant foods was probably quite extensive, because he knew a lot about nutrition. The reason why we say he was ahead of his time is because, number one, he didn't believe in vaccinations. So my mom was quite resentful of this. Actually, she tells the story as being the only kid outside of her classroom while everyone else was getting vaccinated, and it made her feel out like an outcast. And then number two, which I think is this always shocks people. My grandfather didn't believe in eating white flour, and that means that they didn't actually eat pasta in the house. So they were the only Italian family in the neighborhood that actually didn't eat like all the Italian Americans. So that might kind of give you a glimpse into, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
yeah, yes, and also, could you continue speaking about the transformation, because you stopped when you went plant-based, your story, but it went on. It didn't stop there. Can you take us more on your journey, please, and your own transformation?
Yeah. So first of all, I decided I was going to officially be vegetarian by the time I was 16. I made that decision when I was 15. I couldn't do anything about it because I had no control over my life. So what I decided to do when I was 15 was I first said, I can give up fast food. I can give up soda, candy bars, and yes, those were the three big processed foods that I was consuming on a regular basis. And so I gave myself a year to quit those things. And then I already started feeling some changes. Then I went vegetarian, and all I did really was I just started eating more vegetables. And I noticed that I felt I had more energy. I had not realized, here's the thing about transformation, is that you often don't even realize a transformation has occurred until you're living in the results of the transformation. So I did not realize how sad and tired I was until I was suddenly more energetic. I had a clearer mind. I felt a drive to do more. I became hooked on the feeling of self-improvement. And so once my next goal was to become vegan, which I did find very, very difficult to do. For one thing, I was living in, I mostly grew up in Northeast Florida, which for those who have never been, it's definitely a Florida culture, but it's very close to Georgia. So it's got a lot of Southern influence. So the food is very much like a Southern inspired cuisine. And so it's not vegan friendly by any means. And this was in the 90s. So it still was far from being mainstream. And so I found it very challenging to go vegan. But once I crossed over into that point, I proved to myself that I could give up meat, I could give up dairy, I could get into an exercise routine. And so once I realized that I could do those things, then I started working on my inner world. And I found a yoga studio, and I started going to the yoga studio once a week and doing videos on my own at home. I started going to there was a school, a small Taoist martial arts school, that I began taking meditation and Kung Fu and Tai Chi, and started reading philosophy books, started therapy. And from that point on, it's been well over 25 years since that point. I've done all kinds of things like breath work. I still do yoga on a regular basis. I got into sound healing. Now I'm at a point where I'm a facilitator of sorts. I developed my own method of what I call holistic voice work. I'm a voice teacher anyway. I'm classically trained. I sang operatic style for 6 years in my teenage years and my young adulthood. And I've taken that very classical and traditional technique, and I've applied it to more ancient holistic practices. And now I actually teach people how to use their voice as a form of healing. So yeah, that's where I've come, like, full circle.
And also, Bella, one of the things that I really like about what you're doing is that you not just teach music, but that you really teach people to use their voice. And I find that in singing, those of us humans who have never even acknowledged that they have something deep within them that's a gift to the rest of us, they find it only when they begin to sing. Have you seen transformations there with music and voice?
Yes, big time. That's what that's what inspired me to go in this direction. I started out, when I started teaching voice, I found it very difficult. I found it much easier to teach piano. I found it so challenging to teach voice because I was teaching it the same way my teachers taught, which was from a very European classical model. And it never fully resonated with me. But like you said, I knew that my singing voice or my voice in general was the secret to my health and all of my transformations. Because when I was in high school, I was quite fortunate. I'm grateful every day that things lined up for me to be able to attend a performing arts high school, which was a public school. I didn't have to pay for it, but it was an audition-based school. So I had to be accepted. And by going to this school, I attended singing groups and classes at minimum twice a day. But some years I was in music classes 3 times a day. Then there were sometimes rehearsals after school. So I was singing a lot. I'm talking about, I've estimated that I probably sang at minimum 2 hours a day when I was a teenager. And then that's not including all the extra stuff I did after school. So I was getting so much practice learning how to use my voice, understanding the anatomy, and understanding how to use it in a way that's much, much more advanced than the average person who just takes their voice for granted. And it was only later that I found out the science of how the voice, when you sing, you are stimulating your vagus nerve, first of all, which, as you guys probably know, is a nerve that starts at the bottom of the brain and it connects to all of the vital organs. And when it's stimulated, it puts your body into a rest and digest, a relaxed response. And so when I was a teenager, I was experiencing a lot of extremely traumatizing things in my life. And I've often, whenever I've shared these experiences with people who I'm close to, they are absolutely shocked that I've managed to grow up to have the kind of life that I do have. I feel very fortunate to have the life that I have, because most people who experienced these types of things end up on drugs, they end up homeless, they end up in abusive relationships. It's horrible what happens to a lot of people. And it was only when I became an adult, I had been teaching music for many years, and I became interested in what is it about the healing nature of the voice, that I found out, oh my God, it was singing all of those hours every single day that saved me. It's what rescued me from developing chronic illnesses. I had health issues, like I would call them minor health issues. I had chronic sinus infections and headaches that were terrible, but I never ever developed a chronic disease, thank God. And I was also able to stay off drugs. I've never had a drug or an alcohol addiction, because also singing gives you a euphoric experience. I've had students in my voice lessons where, especially the ones with very high pitched voices, sopranos for women, tenors for men, when I'm helping them get up to the highest register of their voice, you stimulate a part of your brain and you can become quite disoriented. And I discovered this when I was in college, practicing my soprano parts while driving. And one day I became disoriented while reaching a very high note. And I realized it was too dangerous for me to sing and drive, which sounds so funny every time I say it. But yes, so I've experienced my students experiencing in real time the euphoric nature of singing, but also you become a bit like a therapist as a voice teacher. And so they are quite comfortable sharing with me their life, what they've been through. And I've watched people transform. Yeah, it's quite amazing.
Thank you so much for that. The reason why I asked you that is because what you just said about the vagus nerve. So when I work with people who have been through a lot of trauma in their lives, and especially people who have experienced their bodies being attacked, I often, and they want to change their diet, I often said, you cannot change your diet with me right away. What I suggest that you do is that you go to a voice teacher first. And also I ask them to also learn, and if they have never learned a musical instrument, to do that. But I think they need to really work on the voice because of just what you said. So when you stimulate the vagus nerve, you also are relaxing digestion. And the digestion is the part of the body which creates havoc or creates healing. And all illness and diseases starts there. So the vagus nerve must be brought into play. So thanks for saying that very, very much. And you haven't finished your story, because you also went from being plant-based to...
Yes, to being raw. And I have to tell you, I was muted, of course, so you didn't hear me. I made an audible response when you said that you point your clients to the direction of voice lessons. That made me so happy, because so many people are still in the dark of this power. I think you said it's this gift that we have deep within us, and you're so correct. And part of my purpose in life is to share with people this power that we have, and to try to do whatever I can to help people use their voices, because voice lessons are quite difficult. They're difficult to teach, and they're difficult to learn. It's very mysterious for a lot of people. So thank you for being somebody doing that for me and for everybody else. So yes, I went raw about 11 years ago. I had finally, my body finally caught up. I had gone through some difficult things in my 20s. I got into a relationship. I actually did end up in a pretty awful relationship, but I got out of it. And that's why I don't count myself among some of the, some of the most awful, the victimized, who never get out and they never transform. But I did end up in a very, very difficult situation that was hard for me to get out of. It took me many years to get out of this situation. And by the time I was out of it, I was shocked. I was like shell shocked. I couldn't even, I could barely function for the first year. All I could do was get myself up to teach my piano students. It was all piano, and I did not have the ability to teach voice at that time. And it was the only thing that really got me out of bed. And I lived in that state of just kind of barely surviving for about 3 years, I think it was. And then finally, my body caught up and I became sick. I went to the doctor. I didn't know what was wrong, but something felt off. My white blood cell count was low, which I didn't know what that meant, but it sounded bad. And then nothing really was fixed after that. Nothing happened. I just kind of continued to live in this sort of like barely living state. And then I developed a headache that did not go away for weeks. And like I said earlier, chronic headaches was kind of one of my, what I called minor health conditions that had been with me since I was quite young. So I didn't really think anything of it until 2 weeks passed, and it had been literally a constant stay in my life daily. I was taking Advil and it was kind of helping, but it wasn't going away. And then finally 3 weeks went by and it's still there. And I thought, this is very, very weird, but I'm checked out. I don't even care that I'm alive at this point. And so it doesn't matter to me. But then finally the 4th week went by. I called my mom and I told her what was going on. And she said, have you checked your blood pressure lately? And I said, no, I never check. No, I don't check my blood pressure. But she said, go to a CVS or something and go to the blood pressure monitor and check your blood pressure. I ended up, I didn't do that, but I ended up making a doctor's appointment for a health clinic. I didn't have, I didn't really it was also a bad financial situation at the time. So I went to this clinic, and when I went in to see the nurse practitioner, she looked at my blood pressure and she kind of freaked out. She said, you need to be on blood pressure medication right now. She was very, very concerned about my high blood pressure. And I said, okay, I guess that explains the headache. And I told her I was not going to take the medication, and she seemed very concerned about that. So I made a deal with her. I said, look, I'll take your paper, I'll take your prescription. And she convinced me to fill. She said, I lied. She told me to fill the prescription. And I said, I'll fill the prescription. And if my blood pressure doesn't go down in a few days, I'll take it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go do some research. I'm going to go do something for 30 days. I don't know what. And then I'll come back in 30 days and we'll see how my blood pressure looks. I never filled the prescription. I went home that day and I started researching. I just Googled natural healing, high blood pressure. And all of these raw vegan websites started coming up, and all of these YouTube channels with people talking about how they healed their high blood pressure with being raw vegan. And I was really surprised. And I was actually kind of upset about it because I did not want to go raw, but I was willing to try anything to avoid taking this medication. I'm very much inspired and influenced by my grandfather. I also never believed in taking prescription medications. The Advil thing was just out of desperation. That was the one exception I would make. But I was determined to never fill that prescription. I did not want to become a lifelong pharmaceutical patient. So I said, okay, I'm going to commit to raw veganism for 30 days. I'm going to see what happens. I did it 100% raw. I even didn't do any like herbs, like dried herbs, because I didn't know if that was raw or not. I only did fresh fruits and vegetables for 30 days, and it was incredible. I became the most annoying evangelist for raw veganism within like 2 weeks. And people were noticing the difference in me. People were stopping me. My friends and my clients were stopping me and like staring at me, staring at my face and kind of examining my skin. And they were going, "What's going on? What are you doing?" And I would tell them, "I'm doing a raw vegan thing for 30 days and it's amazing and I feel amazing." And I would tell them, but as soon as I would say raw vegan, they would kind of like go, "Oh, they really hoped that it was something else because they were not going to do the raw vegan thing." And so that's what happened. The rest is history. I realized I could never go back. And I've been on this raw vegan path for 11 years. Throughout the years, I have experimented with different styles of raw veganism. I eventually, after 6 years of this experimentation process, decided to invest in the Mastering Raw Food Nutrition course that doctors Rick and Karen Dina do every year. I did that for a whole year. The best investment I've ever made in my life. So I've been totally confident in my process ever since I completed that coursework. And yeah, so now I'm at a point where I think, okay, I've been doing this for over a decade. It's time for me to start sharing what I know. And so that's why I started my blog, Raw Vegan No Friends. And why I enjoy being on podcasts like this so that I can try to connect with people.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And we're going to bring in Sabina. I know you haven't heard anything that Bella has said. Excellent story. She just really gave us some amazing recounting of her own transformation and transition. Sabina, have you tried doing any voice lessons? I know you've done a lot in your life, in your own transformational growth. Have you ever tried using music or voice lessons? And welcome, by the way.
Unmute. Yes, thank you. And yes, I actually studied acting many years ago in New York City, and I was taking voice lessons there. I had a private coach for a while, and I was in a class, and I found it very, very helpful to be fully self-expressed, because that was one of the things I did not learn as a child. My voice was actually shut down by a very authoritative father, where my voice didn't matter. So when I started acting, I noticed I had a hard time actually projecting my voice, and I had a hard time actually speaking up because I was never taught to. So taking voice lessons, I found extremely supportive on the journey of self-expression, which is part of, being a free being. We need to be able to have our voice not just heard, and also feel comfortable in having our voice project out there and land out there. So yes, voice lessons, I highly recommend anyone, not just actors, anyone who wants to be free in their expression, to take voice lessons.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Which brings us to Lisa, because Lisa, you also started as an actress. And how did actually connecting to your voice assist you?
That's such a beautiful question. I think it's interesting. I'm just thinking about the whole journey and how when we come from an environment where we're not allowed to express ourselves, right? To make ourselves visible, to share our true essence, how that experience shapes your life and influences it. I started singing at 10 years old. I was in choir the entire time, all through middle school, all through my senior year in high school. And I think it's really interesting because it is such a powerful place to be when you're expressing your voice. Like she talked about the vagus nerve. And something I've noticed that recently is I've started to sing in the house. And I noticed that it's like, oh, I'm singing again, just singing for the pure expression of who I am. And it like my voice became uncaged. And part of that has been writing poetry. Part of that has been being in plays, being in commercials, being in films. But this period in my life, I feel like that bird is just singing its own unique song. And I think what a special opportunity to guide students through that journey. What a beautiful thing to do. And what you said, Dorit, how you tell your clients, start with that first. That's such a gift for people to have that awareness from each of you.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, I don't see how anybody at all can change their diet without finding their voice first. Because you're not going to find the voice through the diet, but you'll find your voice first, then you will be absolutely transformed into a whole different energy system afterwards when you change the diet. So that's why I really wanted to have Bella on so much. And Bella and I spoke before when she was in Northern California about when she comes here to LA, that we do some work, to do some events together and do some things together. Bella, before we go to Pete, how can people find you if they wanted to really take advantage of doing some voice lessons or just, music lessons with you?
They can find me on Instagram. My handle is Raw Vegan Bella, just like it's spelled here. I also have a website with that I keep all of my music information and contact. It's Bella Payne. So Bella is spelled like you see it on the screen, and Payne is spelled Payne. Payne. BellaPayne.com. And please reach out. I love working with singers now. Like I said before, it was always very difficult for me, but now I've really found my way with it. I enjoy it very much. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. You're welcome. Pete, did you ever have voice lessons, and have any of your children done so?
My older sister, she was a singer and had lots of voice lessons. So I haven't, no. Such a beautiful story, Bella. It's really inspiring. Me and Hannah are enjoying every part of it. And if you was nearby, we'd all come. And I so relate with the voice. It's early days of the festivals. I'd be one of the people early hours of the morning around the fire, just chanting away, singing with everyone else, really in a freestyle, which was really interesting in terms of some of the pitches that would come out of my mouth. I was playing didgeridoo around that time. I had done breath work probably 17 years before, so I'd been working with breath work and playing my didgeridoo. So I'd implement the two. So then probably going on from that into voice was my lungs were more, or my whole body would have been more relaxed and could express. On the beginning journey of my 17 years, nearly 18 years on the raw food, it was interesting what you said, Doreen. Beautiful what you said as well. How you put them onto voice lessons or some other protocol. I had this Jinshin Jitsu really. So that really worked like acupuncture on my body, which I was doing a year before I went raw. That opened up doors for me. So we could say that was like voice, releasing tension, releasing trauma, for me to see and receive a next step of my journey. And, the ring finger connects to lung and large intestine. I remember seeing a friend of mine. I said, he actually busted that actually. And I said to keep holding it gently. And then that harmonizes your lung and large intestine. And in terms of digestion, the thumb, all these, say, organs connected to fingers. So we can really harmonize things there. So I think it's a beautiful story. There was things I've missed as well. I think very brave of you at the age of 10. I mean, well done. And, for spirit to kind of come through like that, challenging, I relaxed in terms of youngest at 6, I would just keep doing my thing, and then people would come around, especially if they were more ill, and my siblings, and inquire, or if they have problems, then it's their problem, not my problem. In terms of my journey, your roots have to be very strong now, because as Bella mentioned, she's looking great. She's looking great. What have you done? You mentioned raw food, and it's just like there's a subconscious program. We know we have to face our fears, So it's like subconsciously we know, and we're clearing old debris, old stuff we are very addicted to hanging on to. So when they didn't want to know, you said a facelift, they might have, who's your surgeon? I mean, to me, how ridiculous is that? But well done. I'm not sure. I mean, I can say much more, but maybe I haven't got too much time.
Thank you, Pete. We would like to go to actually Sabina and then Lisa for 1 minute each, and then we'll end with Bella again. Just wrap up for us, please. What for you in your own journey, Sabina, was most outstanding and the most impactful thing you've ever done using your voice?
I would say speaking up, even I felt I'm being choked not to speak because of an old program, and my heart was pounding, but still doing it. So not letting the fear of how I might sound or what people think of me let me stop, but instead doing it anyway with the fear and speaking up for what I believe to be true.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. And same for you, Lisa. Same question.
What a beautiful question. What I come to, what's the bravest thing I've ever done in terms of expressing myself? It's revealing my authentic self, who I truly am through writing. I think that has been, I've learned about myself just by writing. And that is, I think the best thing we can do is to feel safe within ourselves, to share our voice with others. I always go back to that beautiful book, Maya Angelou's A Caged Bird Always Sings. I think that's kind of roughly the title, but it's how even when we're in prison, we still have our voice, right? And breaking out and sharing our music with the world is such a beautiful gift to everybody and ourselves.
And your writing has been spectacular, Lisa. Thank you for that. Bella, we have less than a minute for you to wrap up about your own voice and how you yourself would like to really move into being a much deeper creator on this earth with the gifts that you have brought here.
Thank you. I really resonate with what Lisa just said about writing, and I think that sharing your story is very helpful. And my intention is to become more comfortable sharing more of my personal experiences through my writing as well, and teaching, being as much of an example as I can to try and inspire people to use their voices authentically. Everything you guys said, I really appreciate it very much. And I hope this for everybody watching.
Thank you so very much, Bella. It was a total pleasure. And as Pete just said, simply brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Tune in again next week. So hopefully Sabina will be here at the beginning. And Bella, from our voice to yours, deep gratitude.